Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Thank you for your patience. Fingers crossed this is going to work okay. It's looking promising so far. I can't hear myself talking back to myself. So I hope you got the introduction before. I'll give a super quick reintroduction just in case. So today is with Paul Campion, a visual effects artist and director. He's in New Zealand at the moment, and it's dark and it's the evening there. Obviously, I think it's about this time, but in the evening or thereabouts. And we're gonna talk to him shortly. At the end of the session, there will be a Q&A. We have Danielle,
hello,
who you can't see, but you may well hear her voice off camera. She's monitoring the chat and will be feeding any of your questions through to me. Please, as we go through the chat, if you have any questions, do send them through, and I'll try and include some along the way, and then but we'll have a more comprehensive. Okay, now let's see what question we've got at the end. Paul Campion, like I said, has worked in the industry for over 20 years, and I will what I'm going to do is just get straight in. I'd like to. Paul, are you there? Let me get Paul on the line.
I am.
Excellent, there he is. Paul, it's nice to have you and not have my own voice coming out of yours, which is what it was like before, which was very odd.
Yes.
But yeah, thank you for joining us today. I think I've got everything right in terms of the back catalogue of your career, but I want to go right back and start at the beginning and then bring ourselves up to the current day, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm going to go really, really far back, actually, if it's okay to begin with, and just ask, so as a child, you know, did you have a big love of film? Was it where you end up now? Was it something, you know, when you were young that was a big part in your life?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think my first cinema experience that I can remember was going to watch a double bill of Planet of the Apes and Return to the Planet of the Apes.
Oh, fabulous.
So I must have been about 5 or 6 years old, because, yeah, those were
5 or 6?
quite.
Yeah, that's quite impressive for a 5 or 6 year old. I'm thinking of my little girl. I think that would freak her right out.
Well, I think that probably helped with my love of horror films, because there's certainly some quite creepy, twisted stuff in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything starts to make sense. And I mean, following on from that a little bit. So I mean, what would you say the most influential films from when you were a kid that you think has stuck with you now? What still has a bit of a resonance with you?
Well, I always remember watching the original King Kong, the stop motion King Kong. For some reason, it was always on at my grandparents' house when I used to go and stay there. So I watched that religiously. So I had a love of dinosaurs and stop motion animation and just the whole fantasy world. Right. And another one was a film called Jack the Giant Slayer, which was also a very old stop motion animation. And then all the Ray Harryhausen films, Jason and the Argonauts, all those old classic stop motion animation, lots of creatures, fantasy, that kind of thing.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, obviously with your career as a visual effects artist, that makes perfect sense that they would have a particular resonance with you. So, I mean, did you do lots of drawing and painting as well then when you were young? Is that something that you did a lot of, or was that a bit later on?
I think prolific would be a good word.
Okay.
Apparently, my mother told me that when I started drawing, I got really frustrated and wanted to give up because nothing was ever good enough.
Right.
And that's something that's actually followed all the way through my career. Even now, when I'm creating an illustration, I still think it's not good enough. I can do better, and actually get frustrated at myself that I'm not. The talent isn't there to make it as good as I feel it needs to be.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. And I suppose, you know, looking at the catalogue of work that you have gone on to do, you know, I think that's quite a tell that you have that. It's never, it has to always be better. That's always kind of pushing you on. You went to, obviously we're at Confetti, and so obviously there's an awful lot of students here in the creative arts, and your degree. So when you were studying, you went to, was it Bournemouth Art College?
Yes. And I'll just add, before that, actually, when I was at school, I did try to get into the film industry. I think when I was about 15 or 16 years old. So I actually wrote to Industrial Light and Magic, who did the visual effects for Star Wars.
Wow.
And tried to see if I could get some kind of in with them. And I also tried to become a model maker as well. I love building models. So I tried to get an apprenticeship in a model making company when I was about 16.
That's impressive. I mean, I was going to ask you about, you know, did you always know what you wanted to do? And clearly you sort of did. I mean, did you hear back from Industrial Lights and Magic? I mean, did anyone write back to you, or?
Yeah, I think somewhere I've still got the letter.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, they were quite supportive, and obviously they were in California, and they weren't going to be flying some 15-year-old over there.
You
But, you
never
know,
know.
yeah, they you know, they made the effort to write back to me and say, just, you know, keep on doing what you're doing.
Fantastic. So you obviously had an idea what you wanted to do, but you then went on to study. So what was the thinking there? Was it just, right, I need to get a qualification to show some credibility to get me into this industry that that I'm trying to get into?
Yeah, I mean, I guess back then there weren't any jobs advertised in the film industry. It was completely closed, and the visual effects industry was even more secretive. I mean, just trying to find out, there weren't websites back then. There weren't magazines that advertised for jobs. You had to know someone who worked in the industry, so it was a completely closed shop. And I think, you know, I had this absolute need to work in the film industry, making monsters, doing miniatures, doing special effects, doing matte painting, something, but there just wasn't any easy way in. And I didn't go down the route of making my own films. I think because I was so into drawing, I liked designing things, so I wanted to design the monsters. I did do a little bit of building stop motion models, but I never got further than building them. I never actually filmed them. So at that point, it's like I had to do something creative, and illustrating seemed to be the logical way that maybe I could get in doing concept art and designing and that kind of thing.
Right, yeah. So you were, like you say, you were painting physical models and doing something that, again, we'll come to. You went on to do a version of that in your professional career a bit later on.
Yeah.
So, and am I right in thinking did you actually study computer animation? Is that?
Well, I studied technical illustration first, so this was pre-computers.
Yes.
So yeah, we didn't have any. There was no computer graphics. I think maybe in the fourth year there was a Quantel paint box, which was the most rudimentary computer graphics there was at the time. So I studied. I was an airbrush artist. And just painting with paintbrushes and an airbrush. So back when there's no Control Z, there's no undo, you have to get everything right. So you can't make any mistakes at all. So it does create a discipline. And I studied technical illustration, so that's the ability to draw anything in 3D. Perfect perspective. So drawing architectural drawings, rooms, objects, anything like that. Obviously, technical illustration. Specifically, the course was designed to churn out people who would do car manuals and cross sections of car engines. So when you have those exploded images,
Yeah.
and they've all got to be in perfect perspective. You know, everything's got to be exactly right. And a few people went off to work for the military doing tank manuals as well. That was a big thing because there's a big military tank presence down in Dorset.
Where you were near where you were studying at the time, sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So after you've finished your studying, you went and got a job. What was your sort of first, or what were the first jobs that you got when you came out of your education?
Well, I went freelance almost straight away, which was quite a tough thing to do in hindsight. But while I was on the course, I realised that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life drawing cross sections of car engines, and I wanted to draw monsters and fantasy images, science fiction, that kind of thing. And I actually annoyed my lecturers by kind of going off track and using fluorescent colored paints in some of my technical illustrations. I think one of them was a chrome robot holding a baby up that had a green mohawk, which they were very upset about. And they couldn't quite fit me into their program, and I just wanted to do something different. So yeah, after college, I left and became a freelance illustrator, and ended up doing a lot of computer games covers, book covers, and magazine covers.
Now, I believe we have an example or a few examples of some of those that you've just mentioned. So I don't know if we can. Hopefully they'll pop up on the screen as we keep talking. But here we go. Fantastic. So that looks pop. I remember I had that book. Mm-hmm. I remember, and I didn't know when I was reading it that I would one day meet the person who did the illustration for the cover. But here we are. Isn't life strange? There we go. But
that popcorn, that was all over the underground as well. Those posters were everywhere when it came out. So that was that was quite a big deal for me.
Brilliant. Oh, no way, yeah. And then the Star Wars, there we go, yeah, the Bounty Hunter. So what year are we in now, roughly?
This would be late 90s.
Got you, okay. So you're now working as a freelance illustrator, and you're getting some work, and there are some examples of your work. So, but what happens next? So,
well, again, I still had this burning desire to work in the film industry, and I thought maybe I could get work as a concept artist, but again, it was still a bit of a closed shop. And there was a couple of things happened. There's a magazine called Cinefex started to be published, which is the Bible of visual effects. And I noticed that there were some adverts in the back for jobs in the visual effects industry, which so suddenly there was someone you could go and talk to or approach. The other thing was the advent of CGI and computer graphics, and specifically Jurassic Park and I think Starship Troopers were the two films that revolutionized the industry. And also Photoshop came along as well, and suddenly you could start doing some rudimentary 3D on an Apple Mac at home. So I started learning Photoshop, I started learning 3D, and then I realized that was probably the future. And that was my way into the film industry. So I decided to go back to college, and I did a master's degree in computer animation at Bournemouth University.
Yes. So was it fun doing, studying at that time and in Bournemouth? And did you enjoy your time when you were studying there?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite good because I already had a bit of experience. I wasn't coming fresh out of school, so I was freelancing. I had my own flat, so I had a little bit of money coming in, which was nice. So I was still doing a little bit of the illustration, and then as a slightly older student, it was only a 1 year course. It was essentially a degree crammed down into one year. I was 100% focused on what I needed to get out of it, which was a job in the film industry.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all of us who worked on that course worked very, very hard. We actually worked in shifts, 8-hour shifts during the day.
Wow.
So some people would come in midnight till 8 a.m. Then there'd be 8 a.m. to the afternoon, and then the afternoon shift would come in because we only had one computer between three people.
Crikey, yeah. Again, yeah, I suppose, you know, the youth of today, but the, you know, the students at Confetti and obviously modern, you know, students are, you know, they have the luxury of computers. Almost you can't move for computers in some of the rooms, but oh, that's amazing. So around this time, you've recognised kind of a development within your career where you want to sort of shift to, and where the industry that you want to work in is sort of moving, and where there are opportunities. So what do you then do about it? You know, because again, we've got all these students here, and a lot of, you know, quite a lot will be coming to the end of their sort of studies and looking ahead. So when you found yourself in that position at that time, how do you progress from, right, now I have got some skills, experience in this, I've got a bit of experience behind me, a bit of credibility. What happens next? How do you then go on to be, you know, working on some of the biggest productions in the world?
Well, I guess when I went to university to do the computer animation, I went specifically to become an animator. And this goes back to watching the old Ray Harryhausen films and I wanted to animate creatures. And then as soon as I got there was about 60 people on the course, and 60 people wanted to be animators. And I suddenly realized that's quite a lot of competition at the other end. And because I'd already had some experience doing basic modeling and also texture painting, with my background as an illustrator, and texture painting is quite technical, so that kind of goes back to the technical illustration as well. So I realized that everyone wanted to learn to animate, but not so many people liked modeling the whatever they were going to be animating, and hardly anyone wanted to texture their models. So I decided that I would just specialize in texture painting and a little bit of modeling, and that would build on the professional experience I already had. And hopefully that would give me a better shot at getting a better job at the end of it with less competition, which is kind of what worked.
Yeah, right. Oh, it's very canny. So, but you were thinking ahead. So you were, you know, yeah. So how did that work? So you've realised, actually, if I specialise in this area, there is a greater opportunity for me to potentially, you know, to further my career, and it's something you have a bit of an edge. So you're recognising the strengths that you have. So what happened then? I mean, in terms of where did you start looking for work, and how did you get a break into doing the kind of texture work?
Well, while we were doing the master's degree, we heard that there was going to be Lord of the Rings films were going to be made in New Zealand. And I told everyone on the course that I was going to go and work on them. I had no idea how I was going to achieve that at that point. But I was a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I used to play Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid. I had all the little lead figures I used to paint, including the Balrog creature, which was always my favorite monster. And so I had a goal. I didn't know how I was going to achieve it, but I knew that as soon as I'd finished the master's degree, I had to get a job straight away. I didn't want to be stuck as a graduate with no work. I just wanted to get into the industry, get a job under my on my CV, and then try and leapfrog up to better and better jobs. So I took the first job I could get, which was as a modeler for Lego. So this was working for a company that was, well, it was Lego making computer games. And as you can understand, Lego bricks, CG modeling, they're not that complicated.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. Nice, yeah, relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
And so how long was that just like a one-off job, or was that for, you know, a contract for a number of months or years? Or
no, that was a full-time job, but at the same time, Walking with Dinosaurs had come out with the visual effects done by Framestore, and Mike Milne, who was the head of the department, had come to Bournemouth University and done a talk there. And I'd stayed in contact with him, and I was kind of trying to butter him up a little bit and sending him my work and seeing if I could get into Framestore. So I knew, you know, I had the job at Lego, so suddenly I wasn't a student anymore. I wasn't an ex-graduate. I was a professional. working in the industry. And then I applied to Frame Store and got that job. So I left the job at Lego. Right. And then I was one of the first people they hired. They'd done the first season of Walking with Dinosaurs, which was groundbreaking in terms of doing CGI dinosaurs for a very low budget. And then they were ramping up to do the second season, and I was one of the first people they hired in. And then I was really sneaky because they were hiring at that point for Lord of the Rings in New Zealand. And I just landed a job with the hottest visual effects company in the world, Frame Store. So I had that on my CV, even though I'd only been working there, I think, a couple of weeks, maybe.
Right. So just quickly. So again, there's a couple of things I wanted to touch on there. One, we obviously with all the students, all of the lecturers often talk to them about the importance of networking and the need and the importance of maintaining relationships. And you've just given a really good example of that, where you say, you had the guest lecturer, you've made the effort to keep in touch, and that has ultimately helped. Obviously, your work has been the thing that's really got you the job, but without that, you've made sure that you've had that contact there to be able to kind of capitalise on the work that you've been doing, and that paid off.
Yeah.
But that's happened, but all the time, you've still been keeping your eye on Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
And so, and how did that work? I mean, I say that. What were you doing? I mean, where were you looking? There is no official. Where did you find out that they were hiring?
I can't remember. I can't remember if it was in Cinefex or if there was a website by that time. At that point, I'm sure there might have been a website somewhere.
Right. But the point. Sorry, Paul.
It would have been common knowledge at that point. It would have been, that information would have been publicly accessible. So, because a lot of other people I knew were looking at it as well. And some of my friends who graduated, who'd come straight from school and then straight to university, they thought they didn't have enough experience to go to Lord of the Rings, whereas I already had kind of 10 years professional experience. So
and of course, you just landed a rather tasty job as well.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So you've got this amazing opportunity, but you spot Lord of the Rings. So so what happens then? So you apply, obviously.
Mm-hmm. On the sly, very quietly.
Yeah.
I applied for a texture painting job because I was hired as a texture painter and modeler to create dinosaurs on the Walking with Dinosaurs TV series. I sent everything off, I think, by post at that point. Yeah. I got a phone call a week later, a phone interview from New Zealand, and they offered me the job over the phone.
There and then, off the back of the telephone interview.
Yeah, and I think what they wanted was they couldn't afford to hire the best people in the world, so they were kind of looking at the next couple of levels down. But they were very clever in that they wanted to bring on people that were passionate about Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
that it wasn't just technicians to sit in front of computers and churn out work. They wanted people who were there for the project. And I was a huge Lord of the Rings fan, so that really helped as well.
That is clever, isn't it? Yeah, if it's a passion project, not just for the director, but for pretty much everyone who's there, then you are, like you say, that's interesting. You're upping the whole level by a kind of, I suppose, a sort of a number of degrees that you might miss if you're just going to try and fill the roles on a purely practical level. That's fascinating. And so you then you had to hand your notice in.
Yeah, unfortunately, the person I was sitting next to, Carlos Rosas, who was an animator, who was one of the, they only had a few animators on Walking with Dinosaurs, and they were, again, these group of guys are like best in the world. So he just applied as well, and he'd just been offered a job. So and the head of the department, Mike Milne, his office was right behind our desk, literally like where my door is. That would be his door.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there, and Carlos says, oh, I've got to go and talk to Mike Milne because I've got to hand my notice in because I'm going to Lord of the Rings. Well, I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to have to do this in a minute as well.
Yeah.
So Carlos came out a little bit sheepish, and he said, "Oh, Mike's not really that happy but, that I'm leaving." And then I had to go in about 10 minutes later and tell him that the first person he's just hired in a few years is jumping ship and leaving as well. And I stayed in contact with Mike Milne afterwards, and he was quite angry at first, and then he did say, you know what, if I had the opportunity, I'd have gone as well.
Yeah.
And eventually he came out to New Zealand, and I gave him a tour around Weta Workshop and Weta Digital as well. So,
So it all worked out okay.
Yeah.
That's fabulous. Actually, so is it possible, our tech chaps, to perhaps line up some examples of the Lord of the Rings work, the texture painting? Here we go. So here is the Balrog. Just very quickly, I won't linger, but I remember when this first came out, and I had just bought quite a nice surround sound system, and I sat with all my friends, and when we got to the scene with the Balrog, and I lived in a huge apartment at the time, and we played it probably louder than it should have been several times. We had to keep going back over that scene and watching it when it comes up in absolutely stunning. Both the visuals, the whole thing, obviously, but so that holds a very special memory for me as well. First time we saw that, because it was just like nothing else you'd ever seen.
No, it's fantastic design by Weta Workshop.
Yeah, so your work on that. So we're looking at that image now.
Mm-hmm.
So just talk us through what we're sort of looking at in a way. So
do we want to go back to the? Can we go back to the Balrog?
Can we just go? Yeah, can we go back one? Sorry, chaps. There we go.
So I was the texture painter. So I painted his skin textures, and in 3D. And I was working with a shader writer who was developing the look of the fire and the way that the skin reacts with light. And my job is to paint the skin color, all the wrinkles, what are known as displacement maps. And the two of us spent 6 months working on that.
On that scene?
On the creature, just painting his skin.
Right. Oh my goodness. 6 months.
Yeah, that was kind of our baby. And like I say, I was a huge fan of Lord of the Rings growing up, read the books a couple of times. And all the way, while I was painting it, I had a very small little Balrog lead figure that I painted as a kid, probably like 11, 12 years old, sitting on my computer in front of me. So I've got to say that I was the best person in the world to be painting that creature.
Yeah. I can imagine. I think it's almost like, if you could have told your 11-year-old self that that's what you would be doing one day, you probably wouldn't have believed it, would you? You know, it would have been just wouldn't have seemed realistic, especially obviously when you and I don't know, we're probably similar in age, but going back then as well, the idea of what is available now and what is possible now would have seemed just probably unrealistic. But there you were doing it. Mm-hmm. And so, at this point, have you moved to New Zealand at this point?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you? And is this a permanent move you've made?
I didn't know at that point. I just went to work on the first Lord of the Rings films, and then had no real plans after that. I didn't know how long I was going to be there, and I ended up staying for all 3 films. And actually I was one of the lead texture painters on the 3rd film.
Absolutely. And I think, I'm not sure, we'll perhaps scroll through. We might have some examples. In fact, I know we have, we've got later on some other examples as well. So
that's the Fell Beast.
Yeah.
So I specialised in doing all the creatures and all the evil creatures. I didn't like painting all the pretty elves because they were just too pretty.
Again, the horror in your blood, you know, I suppose draws you to the the darker characters in there, possibly.
Yeah, I also painted the goblins in the Mines of Moria,
Wow.
the Uruk-hai in the second film, the goblin armies. Yeah, and anything evil and nasty that I had a hand in.
Fantastic. I mean, just brilliant, brilliant work. Oh, here we go. Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's the what's the name? The spider.
Shelob. Yes,
That's it.
so I had a lot of fun painting all that kind of gungy stuff on the joints, and there was one shot where the camera almost goes down her mouth. So I spent a long time painting all these nasty looking wrinkles down the inside of her mouth and throat.
Oh my goodness. I mean, what do you reference? Do you have a reference for that? Where do you look to kind of, you know, to pull any references for that? Or is it, do you just go, do you know what, and it's just what comes out?
Yes, seafood. I can't actually eat seafood.
You mean you physically can't eat it, as in
No,
you'll have a bad reaction, or?
no, but it's psychological because you know, oysters, to me that looks like some kind of texture for alien egg spawn.
Yeah.
And you know, lobsters and crabs, I mean, that's what all the, you know, the joints of the spider look like. So that's my kind of reference that I'm using for monsters. So I can't, for me, yeah, pulling a leg off a spider and sucking the flesh out that's like something out of my worst, well, something out of one of my films.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness. That's made me feel a little bit queasy, I'm not going to lie. Okay, so now,
Well, this one,
now, where are we now? We're moving on. Oh, this again, we're still on...
Lord of the Rings. So this
Yeah.
is Frodo getting his finger bitten off by Gollum right in Mount Doom. And obviously he's still got the ring on the finger. So they gave me the finger to paint the textures for, because they knew I'd enjoy it.
Brilliant. Oh my goodness. And again, what we're looking at now. So this is...
So this is matte painting.
Ah, yes. So now we've gone to the back. So, you know, can you explain, so the difference now, what are you doing then with these images?
So matte painting is creating backgrounds. So you could be creating them in 3D software, like creating a city, or the traditional matte painting is someone used to actually sit down and paint a scene on a piece of glass, and then they'd photograph it in camera. So they'd position it in front of the camera, and then maybe have a castle on a hill, and that would all be photographed with the camera. This is all pre-CGI. So the matte painting was something that I'd always wanted to do as well. Like I said, I wanted to animate, wanted to be a modeler, and I also wanted to be an animator, and I actually did some matte paintings at Art College as well. And again, got told off because the people running the technical illustration course didn't understand what I was doing. So these scenes, this is Gandalf and Saruman on the top of Orthanc, and the background was known as Ruined Orthanc, when Saruman has cut down all the trees.
Yes.
And they built a huge miniature, about 20 feet tall, for Orthanc Tower, and they built the whole of the background as well, and then they flooded it for when the Ents attack in the third film. But they forgot to film the background for these scenes, so they hadn't had nothing. Right. So we had Ian McKellen was photographed against a green screen, and then they suddenly realized that they'd forgotten to photograph the background to go behind him. So I had to paint these in Photoshop using whatever photographs I could find in the database.
Wow. I mean, there's almost something reassuring about that a production as big as The Lord of the Rings can have the occasional oversight, you know, so we shouldn't beat ourselves up when we forget the odd thing now and again. But oh, here we go. So, and I think we've got examples of some of your matte painting work on a bunch of other rather well-known films as well, which I think we'll come to. I think we've got speaking of which, so this is Sin City.
Yeah. So this was this was a really fun project to work on, because it was all in black and white, so that made it a little bit easier. And then it was so stylized that we were pretty much given a free rein to do whatever we wanted, as long as it fit in the general style of the film.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just going to say, I love Sin City. It's one of those films that when I first saw, you know, it's so far removed from almost anything else that was around at the time, and you know, I just love that. I just thought this is stunning. The whole, all of it, the visual design, the character portrayal. I think, you know, just really fascinating and interesting film, and so. Now, I think what we've got here is we can see. Can you talk us through the progression here? So,
yeah. Do we have the original plate for this?
I think if we scroll, is it back? I think it should be before that, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
Just if we can go back.
Yeah. So that's the. So this is the original plate. So this is the green screen plate that they shot. And that's a stand-in for Bruce Willis over on the left-hand side, who's meant to be hiding behind a wall.
Yeah.
So this is all they shot. And then if we go to the next image. Oh, no, we've jumped ahead there. Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay. Yeah, they're not quite in order. So this image, so this is a 3D layout. So they've tracked the image in the computer and worked out the position of the camera. And this is a 3D layout that an artist has created just as a reference for how they want, in this case, it was an alleyway scene to be laid out. And then this was the reference that the artists were given. And then we just paint over the top of this in Photoshop. So this is my matte painting, and it's all quite stylized, which made it quite fun and quite simple. And you could get away with quite a lot of rough work that wouldn't really pass muster in a normal film. But it was then graded down at the very end, and it all kind of came together really nicely because it's so stylized. So here you see, once it's graded down, it all works really well.
Oh, it just looks fabulous. Yeah, absolutely.
And this one, I'll just say this, that background, I was sharing a flat with 3 friends in San Francisco, and one of them had his own bathroom, but he wasn't very good at cleaning it. So I took photos of it. Obviously, I've embellished it. It wasn't quite as bad as this, but I embellished it a little bit. But a lot of that is, the grimy bathroom in the flat that I was living in.
That's amazing. And and there we go again. I mean, we have a green screen here at Confetti, so you know, any of the students here, this should be giving you some ideas and inspiration for the next Sin City. Oh, look at that! It's amazing. So yeah. And now we're moving on. This is a different film entirely.
Yep. Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
Yes. And so again, we can see the big green screen in the background behind the set.
Yeah.
And if we scroll on, we should be able to see, there we go. So are they your mountains?
Yeah, so if we just go back to the previous one again. So obviously the set looks completely different.
Yeah.
And then go back to the matte painting. So this is a case where Marvel have so much money and they can decide that they don't like the set that they've designed and spent $100,000 on. So they're just going to change it.
Yeah.
Completely.
Unbelievable.
So pretty much everything there, apart from the 2 characters in the foreground, everything else has been replaced in CG. So the bunker was a matte painting that was done by someone else. Yeah. And then I did the background matte paintings of the landscape in the far distance.
Wow. And I think there's another example of some mountains as well on another very well-known film. If we scroll on, I think it might be, is it next or it's coming up very soon? Oh no, we've jumped slightly out of order. I'm going to come on to this because This is actually a still from one of your short films, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, you see, what I wanted to go on to ask, which I'll do it now since we're looking at this, is so at this point, you have a very successful career working as a visual effects artist, doing the matte paintings, doing texture paintings on these huge films, but you have aspirations to be a director.
Yeah, I think that comes back to the horror films and loving it. Yeah, anything to do with horror films. And I just started to getting a bit tired of all the remakes and sequels and prequels. And I thought, surely I can do better.
Yeah.
Which maybe looking back was probably a little bit arrogant at the time. It's a lot harder than it seems.
Well, you say that, but again, we had Noel Clarke on yesterday, and you see, I listened to his interview. He made an interesting comment about needing to be ruthlessly ambitious, and he was making the point about that. You know, he would watch things, and like you just said, think I can do better, and it wasn't. I liked his description because he was saying how, you know, you could see it as arrogance to say I can do better, or you could see it as actually, it's a reflection of his actual ambition in terms of where he wants to go, which I think is what you're saying. I think it's the same difference. It's not necessarily, it's not arrogance. But I want to do that. I want to have a go at that, and I think I can do that better. So, and I suppose, you know, from my point of view, I wanted to. So So while you're doing these other jobs, are you writing? Are you developing ideas whilst you're doing your day job, or did you go, I'm going to stop and then focus on, actually, now I want to do this. It's clearer and clearer to me. I want to be a director. I've always wanted to try this. Now's the time. How did that work?
Yeah, I did both. I mean, initially it was, yeah, I was still working, and then I started. I think my first foray into filmmaking was a 48-hour film festival in New Zealand, and I just joined a team and helped out, and then I ended up directing one that wasn't very good, but then I kept in touch with the writers, and I don't know, for those people who don't know how a 48-hour film festival works, or certainly the one in New Zealand, is that you've got 48 hours to make a film. So you start at 6 p.m. on Friday, and 6 p.m. on Sunday, you have to deliver your finished film. And if you're 1 minute late, you're disqualified.
Yeah.
And you are given a genre, you're given an object, a line of dialogue, and maybe a character that you have to include. And then you can make the film about anything. And obviously the one that everyone wants is horror, because it's fun. I think we got musical, which is when you have a group who have no musical talent whatsoever, you haven't got any actors who can sing or dance, and you haven't got a musician on your team, it's quite tricky. So we failed quite abysmally at that. But I kept in touch with the writers, and I actually had an idea of a couple that mess around with a child's alphabet toy and kind of turn it into a Ouija board and accidentally summon up a demon that possesses the family hamsters. And the hamsters were supposed to be little they were just going to be literally sock puppets with red dots on them. That was the original idea. Because
now, well, that did go on to be a short film, didn't it? Because we have a copy of that, which we'll show a clip of. I've done a couple of 24-hour film challenges myself. I mean, you know, I can't recommend it enough in a way, because it's, like you say, you can fail miserably, but what it will do is sort of highlight in huge, bold capital letters where you need to fill your gaps in, and where your strengths are, weaknesses are, and so on. But that's interesting. But so that led on to Night of the Hell Hamsters.
Yes.
So this is, am I right? Was that your first short film then?
That was, yeah. So I developed that story with the writers from the 48-hour film festival.
Yeah.
and I think I was back in England at this point, and I found a producer, might have been on Shooting People,
Yeah.
and then we started putting it together, and then suddenly I'm on location in Norwood in South London, and everyone's looking at me going, right, Paul, how do you want to set up your first shot?
Right, fantastic. Well, I suppose that's a good point. If our technical wizards up in the gallery can help out here, I think, are we okay if we watch perhaps a couple of minutes of, we won't do that yet, we'll do that maybe a little bit later on. So bear with us again, we'll sort that out. We'll line that up. I'm jumping at them a bit too quickly. Oh, although we can see a picture of it now. I'm awfully sorry. I think we are probably able to watch a section of it, and you can see. Oh, look, that young man there is not quite so young now, and is actually one of the college lecturers here, isn't it? I think a lot of people will recognise that's our own James West. That's our illustrious leader. Is that on the set of Hampstead?
That's awesome. Yeah, so he was sound recordist, and he did the sound design as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah, James and Gary Keller they were recording sound.
Right.
Yeah, and then so that's quite a good picture. Again, that's Jim there,
Yeah.
and that's definitely a physical embodiment in me of the stress of directing. even the motion blur.
That's perfect, and there's a big old Digibeta there as well. Was that hired or was that borrowed?
That was we had two directors of photography. So yeah, one had the Digibeta cam. I think he wanted to shoot it on 16mm, but the producer was freaking out about the cost. So yeah, we shot it on Digibeta.
That's great. Well, I think we might, if you don't mind, Paul, what we'll probably do is just move on. We won't show the clip of Hampstead because I want to actually show one of your other short films in its entirety, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, I think it's just worth adding as well. I mean, you've done very well. Your short films, Night of the Hell Hamster, Eel Girl, The Naughty List, they've won quite a few awards at festivals, and you know they've I think they've helped certainly your progression onto features, which is something we're going to come on to shortly. But so what I would like to do, if we can, in fact, I'm going to ask you if we can get Eel Girl lined up. That would be fabulous to play. In fact, I'm getting the big fat thumbs up, so I think we can go straight to this. Now, this is. Just quickly give us a quick introduction to this, if you can, Paul. So this is Eel Girl.
So this was an idea I had. Originally, it was meant to be a music video. Some friends down in Bournemouth used to have a record label, and they'd given me some CDs to listen to. Yeah. And I just heard one track, and I kind of came up with this idea in my head of this fish girl in some kind of weird research laboratory, and yeah, could never really realize it. Didn't have the money, didn't have the experience, but it kind of stuck with me. And then after I'd made Night of the Hell Hamsters and I had a bit more experience, I went back to it. And instead of, I think this was kind of like 5 years after the album had come out, so I couldn't make it into a music video anymore. But I thought if I just put a little bit of dialogue at the front and try and turn it into more of a short film, then it might play well at film festivals.
Well, I think you made the right choice. It's an excellent short film. So hopefully we can play all of this now. It's about 5 minutes long. So everyone watching, sit back, enjoy. This is Eel Girl by Paul Campion, and yeah. It can play as soon as everyone's ready.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, what is it?
Sir, you're needed in the briefing room immediately.
You know I can't leave. Protocol 482. requires 2 people
I'm
here.
sorry, sir, but you are required to accompany me to the briefing room immediately. Commander Sutton's orders.
Protocol 482 clearly states that... I see. Very well.
That was just excellent, Paul. Somebody made a comment. In fact, Danielle made a comment that it's got kind of very much a sort of similar sort of feel, and obviously to do with the shape of water. You know, that kind of the relationship and or elements of it, you know. But just tell us a little bit. So your role on that, you were the director. What were your roles rather on that film?
I wrote it. I designed came up with the initial designs for the sets. I then worked with a production designer, Mary Pike. But yeah, I kind of art directed everything. So it was kind of my vision. I designed the designed the makeup. Oh, excuse me, just need a glass of water.
Sure, yeah.
Designed the makeup, and well, I designed the look of the makeup. Did the concept art for it, and I also designed all the visual effects shots. So there were quite a lot of shots in there that are a combination of makeup effects and CGI.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in terms of the crew, so how many of the crew on there were people you worked with before, or were you? Because I think, am I right? Again, you've got James West on there again doing your sound design. Is that right?
Oh yeah, every project.
Yeah. So again, I mean, really nice. He's all right. He's quite good. I didn't realise he was so good till I heard this. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. So. Again, so you obviously, I mean, we haven't been able to show the first film that you did, obviously, but, you know, you can see the huge leap you've made from Night of the Hell Hamsters to Eel Girl on, you know, across the board. But what did you then do? So you've made this film, you must be happy with it, and then it goes on to the festival circuit. So just how did that work? How involved were you in that process, and what came as a result of that? How did, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it did really well on the festival circuit. It's a horror film and it's science fiction, and obviously it's got a naked girl in it, so it's gonna play well to the genre crowd. Yeah, so that did fantastically well. Went round the world, won loads of awards. And I had the producer of The Crying Game.
Yeah.
He got in contact with me after seeing it at he was a judge at a short film festival in Soho, and he kind of wanted something similar but in feature film format, which I didn't have. And this is quite an interesting point, is that you need, as a director or writer, you need to have a whole load of projects ready to go almost.
Yeah.
If someone comes knocking on your door. So what happened with that is, I had this big Hollywood producer contacting me who'd done Crying Game and also The Company of Wolves, like fantastic fantasy folk horror tale. You know, and he said, "What have you got?" And I was like, haven't actually got. I've got some ideas, but I haven't got anything fully fleshed out.
I mean, that is really interesting. We again talk to students about this. You know, we talk about the festivals and again exactly what you're saying in terms of thinking ahead and make exactly that same point. But so what did you do? So what happened then? I mean, you obviously sat there going, "Crikey, I've got this amazing opportunity. What do I do?"
Yeah, I mean, I think I had some ideas for feature films that I was developing, but nothing that was like Eel Girl. There were more traditional horror films. I think one was a zombie film. And he wanted something in the vein of Eel Girl, something that was different and weird and beautiful, and I couldn't deliver that, unfortunately.
So what then did happen? What did you do next then?
Then I think I was still working at Weta Digital. I think I quit and then tried to get the first feature film off the ground.
Yes.
Yeah, which was looking back, I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. I should have stuck with a day job and kept the money coming in.
That good.
Yeah, or you know, went for it. You know, go for the passion project and the dream of becoming a director. The problem was myself and the producer. It was kind of like the blind leading the blind. We were quite naive as to how the film industry works and how difficult it is to go from a short film to trying to raise, at that point, £1 million to direct a feature film. Yeah.
That is interesting. And so basically what you're saying is that I suppose, if I understand right, so the reality of what you then set out to try and achieve started to kind of become apparent. But you did make your first feature, though, didn't you? Having said that,
Yeah.
And this is The Devil's Rock.
Yes.
So I'm hoping we have the trailer, which I'm giving the thumbs up, we are able to watch. So despite the difficulty of raising the money and the challenges around it, you did. Just before we do, so, and where did this idea come from? I mean, I think, is it to do with a trip to Guernsey?
Yeah, well, it's myself and the writer Paul Finch. I'd been working with him. I tried to option one of his novels. He's a novelist. He does a lot of crime thrillers and also a lot of horror and a lot of horror short stories. So I tried to option one of his novels years and years ago. In fact, the first short story I'd ever tried to option was a Neil Gaiman short story.
Right.
And this was when I was completely naive, didn't know what I was doing, but I found Neil Gaiman's agent, John Levin, who is one of the biggest agents in the world, emailed him, said, I'd like to option Neil Gaiman's short story. And he was like, okay. And you think for those people who don't know, if you know who Neil Gaiman is, he's huge fantasy writer. A lot of people don't know him, but he's in the genre, he is a god, basically.
Yeah.
And to have someone like that just say, yeah, okay, let's just talk a deal. And I didn't have much money to offer. And he was, completely open to the idea of me getting the rights to one of his short stories and trying to turn it into a feature film.
Wow. So that's what you went on to do?
Not with Neil Gaiman.
Sorry, no, not with that project. I beg your pardon. So,
yeah.
But do you still have the option for that then?
No, but that actually taught me that I've never been afraid of talking to anyone, no matter how big they are in the industry.
Well, sorry, that's part of why I distracted myself. That's the thought I had is there is a pattern here, isn't there? When you were 15, 16, you write to Industrial Lights, and then again, you've just sort of made the point in a way I was thinking of. You applied to Lord of the Rings, you know, and to be on again what was then going to go on to be one of the biggest franchises ever, and even now, even carrying on, like you say, you've done the same in terms of trying to find an option and approaching people. So I suppose the point I'm trying to get to is what you've shown is a certain fearlessness, which is ultimately seems to be driven by just the passion to actually try and fulfill what it is that you want to achieve, which is to be a director of these kinds of work and these kind of films. So, which I just think it's worth recognising and highlighting that, because, you know, it would be easy, and I think it is for a lot of people, to feel, you know, when they have a similar thought or idea to try and achieve and do these sort of things, that, you know, it can seem so distant and unattainable. But you are giving some wonderful examples of actually, you know, feel the fear, do it anyway, because sometimes it actually may well pay off, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and the worst thing that happened is, you know, someone like Neil Gaiman will just say no, and it's like, well, at least you tried.
Exactly. You won't regret not having the fact that you didn't have a go at doing it. So again, I think that's ace. So just quickly then, before we play the trailer to The Devil's Rock. So this idea was, and we'll see we'll get an idea what it's about in a minute. But just if you can, just kind of briefly give us a quick, how did this idea develop then? So you're in Guernsey, that's all I know.
Well, I'd been working with this other writer, Paul Finch, and I'd optioned one of his novels and tried to turn that into a feature film. And again, I'd kept this relationship going with him. And then he'd been sending me short stories, and we were trying to find a film that we could make for a very low budget. So people assume that back then $1 million was quite a low budget. That was when you could make a film, sell it on DVDs, and it would make a lot of money. Nowadays, $1 million budget is actually quite high, especially for a first-time feature film director. Nobody wants to give $1 million to somebody to make a product and they don't know if they can deliver.
Yeah.
In any other industry, any other business, giving $1 million to someone who's never done that before is insane.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I've kind of realized that we had to make something that would be easier to fund, and that comes down to 2 or 3 people in a room. And there's lots of examples of that. Evil Dead, the original Evil Dead, films like Cube, anything with it's just a couple of characters in a single location that you can make for a very limited budget. And yeah, Paul Finch and I were trying to come up with ideas, and then I was in Guernsey doing at a film festival screening Eel Girl, and one of my friends who lives in Guernsey just said, hey, do you happen to know that there's a history of witchcraft and black magic here, which I didn't know about. And Guernsey was also under German occupation in World War II. Cool. And the Germans built these big bunkers and observation towers that looked like something out of their kind of very Bauhausian architecture. And I saw one of these and thought that would be a great place to set a horror film, single location in one of these creepy bunkers.
Yep.
And then I did a bit of research on Guernsey's history of black magic and found out about these things called the bad books, which are genuine books of black magic that are kept in a couple of vaults in 2 libraries there. And I knew about Hitler's obsession with the occult, which is in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah. And also the start of Hellboy as well. And I thought, okay, what if the Germans had found one of these books of black magic, used it to summon up a demon, the demon had got out of control, killed everyone, and one guy has managed to chain it up. And then into this scenario, there are 2 Allied commandos who are on a sabotage raid who walk into this situation. So that was the premise.
That's fabulous. So, I mean, that's a really nice description as well of how you have recognised the needs that you're going to have to try and work to within the constraints of the budget available and the practicality. And yeah, that's a really nice kind of explanation of how you've got to the idea and where that inspiration came from. So, can we? I've got the big thumbs up. I like that. We're going to watch the trailer for The Devil's Rock.
You're safe now. I can take you from here.
Ben.
Jesus. We're on the wrong beach. We leave now. Give me 10 minutes, Joe.
You are indeed a long way from home. You may not believe this, but you and I are in the same boat.
Who is that woman up there?
I know you're listening.
If only you knew the truth of that. One does not summon demons without the means to defend oneself against them.
I can be this way for you always.
I curse thee into the depths of the bottomless pit, there to remain in unquenchable fire until the day of wrath.
Release me.
What were you expecting, my love? The devil?
There we go. Absolutely great. So you did manage to make your film, and it has sold in several territories around the world. It seems to have done really rather well for her. I mean, I'm imagining your aspirations for the future are to build on everything you've learned so far, obviously. And do you have another project in the pipeline?
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll go back a couple of steps. So I actually remortgaged my house
Oh, wow.
to get The Devil's Rot made. This was out of pure frustration trying to raise money, and trying to work out how we could make a film that was basically 3 people in a room.
Yeah.
So I remortgaged my house and I put the first money in. And originally we were just going to make it for, I think it was £75,000 or £100,000 max. And then we managed to get some extra money from the New Zealand Film Commission. So the total budget was about £250,000, which is still very low. But having said that, the film didn't make enough money to be considered successful.
Even with the sales, you know, in different territories and everything else.
Yeah. So I thought, okay, I've got a feature film under my belt now. I'm kind of like stepped up a huge level, and tried to get the next few films off the ground. And the reaction was from the industry was kind of, eh.
Wow, that's a really fascinating insight. So, I mean, you must have found that a little bit disheartening. I mean, that's...
Yeah, I mean, it's been quite a long journey learning how the film industry really works, and it's the film industry and it's the film business, and the business is making money. Yes. You're making a product that has to make money. All the way through the chain, even down to the cinemas that are selling popcorn. They need a certain amount of bums on seats so that they sell popcorn, so they make money. Yeah. So if you're the film's got quite a following now, but it didn't make enough money for anyone to really sit up and take notice and go, okay, we're going to give you some more money to make another one.
Yeah, I suppose just purely, like you say, looking at it from a business point of view, they just look at the figures rather than look at the product. Which again, because as a product, in terms of the film, the technical aspects of it and everything, it looks fabulous. It's really well shot and directed. Obviously, it's nothing to do with that. It's to do with actually, at the end of the day, what if we look at the balance. Do we see an equation that we think warrants further investment, rather than look at the product and say, does that, whoever's created this and that team, do they warrant further investment? I suppose it's a really interesting insight into the reality of the industry. So yeah, that's fascinating. I suppose also, can I just ask? I don't know if what your thoughts on this are, but in terms of what kind of director would you say you are? I mean, with your background, you to a large extent, I'm assuming you're sort of then self-taught as a director, although you would have been present on sets, and you like you've told us already, you've been through a certain sort of arc of experience with working right back from the sort of 48-hour film challenges, your own short films and so on. But where would you say as a director your strengths are, or
well, this was actually, I think, the first feature film set I've been on. So despite working on all these big films as a visual effects artist, I'd never actually been on set and watched a director work. So it was a kind of a trial by fire.
That is interesting. Wow.
And certainly on the first day, actually standing in this set that we're looking at, we're suddenly there. The set's been built. The actors are there. There's about 30 or 40 crew standing around. We've got 2 cameras ready to go.
Yeah.
The actor is standing by the doorway, and he knows what he's got to do. And 30 people are looking at me going, okay, Paul, where do you want to put the cameras and how do you want to cover this? And there was a moment of absolute sheer panic. And I thought, what am I doing here? I've got here. This is where I want to be. And I'm so completely out of my depth. And I had to mentally flick a switch in my head and go, okay, you have got here. This is what you want. Now be a director. And even if you don't know what you're doing, you've got to project the image to everyone else that you do know what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. They want the reassurance that you have got your hands on that wheel and you're steering it in a direction that they can believe in, I guess. So
Yeah, and I was given some very good advice on Eel Girl by Richard Taylor, who's the head of Weta Workshop, who did all the makeup effects for Lord of the Rings. And he said the third day on a film shoot is normally when they fire the director. So that's when the director has lost control, is out of their depth, and is sitting in a corner while the first assistant director and the director of photography have taken over.
Yes. So you got past day 3, obviously.
I did. Yeah, I did actually have a moment of losing control about halfway through. Myself and the DOP had a bit of an argument, and then I ended up having an argument with the producer. And then I was, at one point, that guy, we were on a beach, so I couldn't sit in the corner, but I was stepping back while the first AD and the DOP shot a scene without me, almost.
Yeah, right. I've seen to some degree that happen myself, and you know, it's often nothing to do with the ability of the actual director. It's often an accumulation of a number of things. But clearly you got through it, and it hasn't put you off. You are. I mean, we'll come to it in a minute. You've got a current project that you're working on. But I just wanted to ask one more question. So, I mean, we're almost out of time, unfortunately. But what I want to ask, what do you think, in your experience to date, what makes for the best experience on set? You know, when you are in the position you find yourself in as a director, what's kind of, you know, in the comfort of the situation we're in now, what is the best advice you can give yourself, thinking, right, when I'm there, what do I need to, what's going to create the best situation?
Preparation. Yeah. Absolutely. I storyboard everything. I go in, I know what I want to shoot most of the time. And if you haven't prepared and you're having to block it out on the day and work everything out there and then, absolute confidence and trust in probably in your DOP as well. You know, trust the team around you. Yeah. I heard a very good quote, I can't remember who it's from, that a good director only becomes a good director by surrounding himself with a good crew.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's about as good an advice as you can get. Now, I want to just come to then, before we've got, I'm going to have time for a couple of questions, unfortunately, but I would just like to ask you about then where you are at now, because so at the moment you're doing what? Tell me what your life is involved with at the moment.
I'm freelancing as a matte painter in New Zealand. I'm trying to finish my last short film that I shot a couple of years ago that's got delayed in post-production for various reasons, including COVID, moving to the other side of the world, and life getting in the way. And I'm just developing another project, another horror feature film with Paul Finch.
Oh, fantastic.
Co-writer of The Devil's Rock.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get, you know, we haven't got anything, unfortunately, we can't show any sort of sneak previews or any snippets to do with those things. But the Back in Business, that's the short film, I believe you're referring to, isn't it, that you're working on now, that you're finishing off?
Yes.
And am I right in thinking, oh, there we go, with the fantastic actor, Matthew Kelly. We talked a little bit about this just before we came live on air. I don't know, a lot of the students here will probably be too young. Matthew Kelly was huge when we were young as a host on shows. I think like Stars in Their Eyes, was it?
Yes.
And a bunch of other stuff. And we were saying, I said, when you know, you're used to seeing somebody in one particular role, and then I remember, I can't remember what it was now, but I saw him in something, it was a drama, I think it was an ITV drama, and he was just brilliant as an actor. I mean, genuinely, wow, you know. But so you've managed to get Matthew Kelly in the film?
Yes, and again, that's just through contacts. The casting director that I've worked with ever since Night of the Hell Hamsters,
right?
She had a contact to him, and again, it was like, let's just ask him. Yeah.
There you go again. There's that recurring theme. Just, you know, oops, I beg your pardon. That shouldn't have been on there. I'm awfully sorry. So yeah. Oh well. So are you close to finishing that? Is that?
Yes. Yeah, we've the edit's done. The music is done. James West is going to hopefully help out with a bit of sound design, and then it's just down to me finishing the visual effects, which is a whole load of matte paintings.
Okay, and then what? And that's a short film. So is that going to go on the circuit again? Is that you're going to put that out and look to try and raise interest from that toward other your feature projects and so on, or?
Yeah, I mean, when there is a proper festival circuit again, because obviously that's all on hold as well. So the fact that the short film's been delayed, it's like, well, where would we have put it out anyway?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, listen, right, so if it's okay with you, Paul, we're probably in the last sort of 5 minutes or so of our meeting. I'm going to signal to my assistant, who is off camera, Danielle. I hope you can hear her. She's going to put a question to you from one of the students.
Hey, Paul.
Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
Good. Okay. I've got a question. Well, it's kind of a similar question from both students, Harry and Jess. It's to do with artist inspiration. So who inspires you?
Well, when I was an illustrator, it was a whole load of fantasy and science fiction artists called Jim Burns, Michael Whelan, Chris Moore, John Bolton, who did a lot of horror, and also a guy called Les Edwards, who I ended up commissioning to do some illustrations for The Devil's Rock. So that was fantastic, working with one of your heroes.
Yeah, right.
Wow, amazing. I've got another question. It's a little bit lengthy, though, from Stephen. Stephen has said, as a VFX artist, what are your thoughts on the use of fully CG rendered human faces? For example, resurrecting Peter Cushing as Grand Moff Tarkin for Rogue One in 2016. Do you think this technology has a place in film? So do you think it's necessary when we can just recast roles instead? Like, do you think it's ethical to keep doing this in the future?
I would rather see someone recast in the role than trying to bring a dead actor back to life. Yeah, I mean, it's a whole can of worms, that question. I think at the moment the technology is not there. It's still that uncanny valley. It looks a bit weird. And I'd rather see someone in makeup and see a real performance than see a CGI face that just looks a bit off. Yeah, in terms of ethics, again, that's a huge question there.
Complicated.
I think CGI is better kept for creatures and monsters, or even stuff like Avatar, to do things that can't be done in real life. But if you can do something in real life, we should stick to real people in front of the camera.
Yeah.
I'll just take one last question then. So this is an anonymous question. If you could work on any film which has already been made, what film would it be?
Alien.
Something horror. Yep, Alien.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Ridley Scott is one of my heroes. In fact, I saw there's a question, what's your favorite director? So Ridley Scott probably my favorite director, and Alien is my favorite film. It just has everything in it: science fiction, horror, amazing story, amazing acting, fantastic monster. The art direction is just, set design is just phenomenal. Yeah.
Well, I think, sorry,
Fab,
Daniel.
thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I hope we get to see Paul Campion in the same vein as Ridley Scott, looking at the work we've seen so far today. I think that, all the signs are there. Just give it time. but Paul, that's been really, really nice talking to you. I think we are about there. So I guess it just kind of leaves me to thank you for joining us today.